What's up, dudes? Welcome back to the channel. More card review time. A fair few cards revealed at the end of this week. Let's go over them. First one, Transmogrifier. This is a neutral 2-drop. After you draw a card, transform it into a random legendary minion, 2 mana, 2/3. This card seems pretty bad. It has some fringe uses in that you can use it to get rid of Hakar Bloods, for instance. But that doesn't actually seem too practical to put in your deck. The effect of this is actually just bad. You put your cards in your deck for a reason. I mean, in the very, very late game, this might be better than drawing some random stuff in your deck, but for the most part, it's a bad effect. It's another bad roll of Faceless Lackey. If your opponent rolls this off Faceless Lackey, you could actually manipulate the board to leave the 2/3 alive for as long as possible, because it's going to really screw up all the opponent's top decks. Pretty much a meme card. Not going to see any play. Next, Kobold Sticky Finger. This is a weapon tech card. 5 mana 4/4 Pirate. Battlecry, steal your opponent's weapon, and by steal I believe you destroy it and equip it yourself with whatever durability was left, and probably any buffs like a deadly poison you'll get as well. Basically the standard you have to compare this to is Harrison Jones. There are going to be certain scenarios where Harrison Jones is better and scenarios where this is better. This is better for tempo. If you're going for pure weapon hate and you only run either this or Harrison in your deck, you probably want this if you're trying to out-tempo your opponent. If you're playing Control Warrior with Weapons Project, you probably want the Harrison Jones because they have such good synergy together. It's not really looking like it's going to be a weapon-heavy meta, to be honest, anyway. So in terms of weapon hate, it's probably not needed, but it's nice to have this card around, and it's an effect that people have been wanting into the game for a very long time, so now that it's finally arrived, it's pretty cool. It is a pirate, and as we'll see from Warrior, they have a pirate tutor card introduced. Rogue already has their own pirate tutor anyway, so there's ways to fetch this if you need to, but it's probably not going to be the case. Next, Dread Raven. It's a 3 mana 3/4. Has +3 attack for each other Dread Raven you control, and it's also a beast. So a 3 mana 3/4 beast isn't good enough to see constructed play, even in beast synergy decks like Hunter. Each one of these is going to get +3 attack. So if you have 2 of them, you're going to have a 6/4. If you have 3 of them, they're all going to be 9/4s, and then it keeps going up and up and up. So you get a lot more damage if you've got a lot of these. There's some potential for OTKs with Thunder Rhino if you reduce Dread Raven and then copy it with Hunter's various copy beast effects. All seems a little bit too slow. Next, Bad Luck Albatross. 3 mana 4/3 beast. Death Rattle, shuffle 2 1/1 Albatross into your opponent's deck. So this is pretty much a Highlander hate card, and given from what we've seen from this set, the introduction of Alexstrasza, and the power level of Highlander decks so far, they're probably not going away anytime soon. So this card might actually see some play if Highlander decks move towards the top of tier 1. You could start seeing some hate in decks that aren't too sad to run this kind of card. Even Highlander Hunter itself might want to run this as a tech card against other Highlander decks, you know. There is a little bit of meme potential if you want to just go for a pure Albatross deck, you know, play it in Priest, resummon it with Psychopomps, all their various res effects, Reborn, that sort of thing, and then just completely obliterate the opponent's deck into just being 1/1s. Don't know if that's going to be strong, but it certainly sounds very annoying to play against. You can also abuse the Death Rattle in Rogue with their various Death Rattle trigger effects. And if you're against Control Warrior, and you've got this card as a tech card against Highlander decks, but you queue into a Control Warrior, I mean, the effect's not too bad. If you're making them draw an Albatross instead of a Brawl, for instance, later down the line, it actually could be game winning for you. And for a lot of mid-range decks, you can actually outvalue Warriors if they don't find, you know, Dr. Boom. So there's potential for this card to actually be good in that sort of matchup as well. And then finally, from the neutrals so far, we have Frizz Kindle Roost, 4 mana 5/4 Battlecry. Reduce the cost of dragons in your deck by 2. People are going a bit crazy over this card, saying it's like the new Kalaseth and stuff. Yeah. I mean, 4 mana 5/4 is really good stats, so you're not going to lose too much by playing this on turn 4. if you're running a very dragon heavy deck, you probably want to think to include this as well. But how strong is it really? Luna's Pocket Galaxy had a sort of similar effect in that it reduces everything to 1. That was a very, very strong card at 5 mana. But the way you abuse the Galaxy is through things like Arcane Intellect and Luna herself. Because you could just spend a lot of your mana drawing, and then with the little amount of mana you had left over, you could tempo out these 1 mana cards. It's not going to be the same with Frizz Kindle Roost, although the setup isn't as hard to do and isn't as negative tempo as playing a 5 mana essentially do nothing spell. But if you're using Arcane Intellect to draw and you're drawing dragons, which are already quite expensive, you're probably not going to be able to fit them both in the same turn, and certainly not with chaining Luna as well. It's going to be a lot harder to do that with Frizz Kindle Roost. More likely what the case of this card is going to be potentially strong in Druid, because you can go Nourish to draw a bunch of cards on 1 turn, and you have more mana available through ramp tools themselves. But in Mage and stuff, I don't know if it's actually that good. You might find it's the case where you play this as a 4 mana 5/4 and you get like a 2 mana discount on something down the line. It's usually going to be the case with this card. And that's certainly fine, but it's not like game breaking, I don't think. In Dragon Druid, it might be a bit stronger because you can ramp into this, like Wild Growth turn 2 into this, into drawing a bunch of cards and having them discounted, and then you'll have extra mana through your ramp tools to actually use the tempo you gain from the mana discounts on the dragons. Yeah, I don't think this is like the new Keleseth. I don't think it's the new Pocket Galaxy either. Hunter got a new 3-drop as if they haven't had enough of them. Diving Griffin. 3 mana 4/1 rush. Battlecry, draw a rush minion from your deck. So, pretty good value for this card. Sort of like Town Crier, comes a bit later. But it kind of acts a bit like a Shadow Bolt in the process, which isn't bad. It can draw itself if you're running 2 of these. But I think the most likely place for this card is going to be in Highlander Hunter, and probably replacing something like Ursatron. This can find you your Ziliax. If you're running Springpro as well, you can find that as well. Potentially if you have a rush minions you might want to be putting into your pool, but I think just having this card, Ziliax, and a Springpro is more than enough to be a good package in a Highlander style deck. Has decent synergy with the side quest that Hunter has as well. This is, if you play side quest, then this plus your spring pause, you're going to be able to activate it very, very easily. So certainly boosts the strength of the side quest, and there might be even like a side quest package that you put into Hunter, which is going to be side quest, Diving Griffins, and Spring Pause, which all seem very good together. Remember, Pirate Warrior is back with Ankar. After your hero attacks, draw a pirate from your deck. It's a 3 mana 2/3 weapon. So in terms of weapons for 3 mana, a 2/3 is certainly below average, but this can potentially draw you 3, maybe even more cards if you can increase the durability. So a 3 mana 2/3 weapon is certainly below curve. You're not going to be killing too many things with this. Maybe a few 1-drops, some lackeys, that sort of thing. Or with combination with minions you either have in board or removal, you can use it to kill some bigger targets. There is a lot of potential in going for a very similar pirate package to the one that Rogue used to run with Raiding Party. Dread Corsair is a very, very strong tempo tool to draw from this, but I think it requires you to increase the attack of Ankar itself just to reduce the cost of those Dread Corsairs. Something you could do is run upgrades in your deck. If you play Ankar and start swinging with it, and maybe play upgrade on turn 4, swing again, you'll be drawing your pirates at this rate. Maybe you draw your Dread Corsairs, but you decide not to play them until you draw your green skin, and then on turn 5 you play green skin, or even you swing with Ankar, draw a green skin, and then play it afterwards, and then your Dread Corsairs are going to cost 0. And for one card, being able to draw you all that synergy is pretty good, I'd say. There is a bit of deck building restrictions with this card. You're not always going to draw Ankar, so if you've got all these weapon synergy pirates, you're going to need to be running more weapons in your deck than just the Ankar itself. The Lackey Lance is a decent enough card in Warrior, but it's got low attack, which has poor synergy with Dread Corsairs and Greenskin. So you might be looking towards having a weapon with a bit more high attack. So when you don't draw Ankar, you can potentially make use of those Dread Corsairs elsewhere. I certainly think this card has the potential to be really good. It just needs a little bit more synergy cards to boost it. Something like a pirate that gives plus attack other than green skin would be great, or some sort of way to tutor this card itself, because the real downside to this is when you don't draw it and the rest of your deck's looking really miserable. I think if any of those synergy cards are revealed this set, this card has potential to be very, very strong. You don't need a huge amount of pirates. I reckon about 5 in your deck would be just fine, because the more pirates you run, the less chance you're going to have of hitting your greenskin / Dread Corsair. So you want to hit that sweet spot. We've got just enough to make use of all the draws, but not enough that your draws are inconsistent. For Priest, we have Breath of the Infinite. Deal 2 damage to all minions. If you're holding a dragon, only damage enemies. Now, this is kind of like a 3-mana consecration if you get the effect off. Even if you don't have the dragon, you can use it as an AoE. Priest is perfectly happy with playing off the board a lot of the time. There was a Mage card which did 2 damage to everything for 3 mana, and that was an okay card. It found its way into some Highlander Mage decks, but it wasn't super powerful otherwise. One of the problems that Priests have with this is that they don't really have great ways to ping minions. If there's a bunch of 2 health minions in the metagame, which there's potential to be in this set, Breath of the Infinite looks way better. But if there's a bunch of 3/3s or 4 health minions, then a lot of the time this card's not going to do enough, and Priest is going to have a real hard time dealing with like the extra health left over. If you're running a lot of dragons in your deck, dragons tend to have like high stats and high mana cost, so they're not exactly great at finishing off targets. So this is a okay card in terms of it would be great if you could use this effect in an aggressive style deck, or even in another class which have pings available. But I think in Priest, I don't think it's that good. I feel like it's just going to be one of those cards that you look back and be like, oh, that was a good card, but it just never found a home. That seems like Breath of the Infinite to me. Next for Shaman, we have Cumulo Maximus. 5 mana 5/5 Battlecry. If you have overloaded mana crystals, deal 5 damage. So calm down, alright? This isn't that crazy of a card. I've experimented in the past with Sunreaver War Mage in Shaman because there were good ways to proc it. You had the 4 mana 3/4, which drew you a 5 or bigger cost spell for 4 mana, and that was a fine card. And you had things like Rain of Toads, Earthquake, that sort of thing. And the Sunreaver War Mage just wasn't actually that good. Now, granted, Cumulo Maximus has better stats, for 1. It has a better Battlecry, for 2. And I think the effect's a little bit easier to activate than the Sunreaver War Mage. Yes, you have to be overloaded, whereas a War Mage you can basically activate it just from stuff inside your hand. But I think you'd rather have a deck full of overload cards than you would having Rain of Toads or other high cost spells, or the 4 mana 3/4 which draws, because they're all way worse tempo. The Thunderhead package of Thunderhead, Zap, Sludge Slurper, Voltaic Burst, Lightning Bolt is good. I've played a lot with it. Alright, that's all you need to activate Cumulo Maximus as well. It is a little bit awkward in terms of mana because you're not going to be activating this until turn 6 realistically. If you have a Zap, you probably want to be spending that with a Thunderhead. And this isn't really ever going to come down on turn 5 with the effect most times. And that's a problem that I've had with 5 mana cards in that Thunderhead deck. Things like Sunreaver War Mage, things like Former Champ are very awkward to play because of your overloads. Basically, the higher cost card you have, the more awkward it is with overload cards. You're going to have some turns where you're like, I can't overload now because I want to play this card later, and it's going to hurt you tempo wise. I think around 5 is just about the cutoff of how expensive a card you can really run in these overload aggro style decks. I mean, this card certainly is better than Former Champ, which is a card I was running before in the deck, so I imagine this replaces that. Remains to be seen whether other cards that within the set want to move in as well. I mean, in Quest Shaman, you could potentially run this, though. There is a lot less overload activators. There's Sludge Slurper, and there is Mr. AoE Man. But there really isn't much else, and you don't really want to be putting overload cards into that deck. You really want all your cards to say Battle Cry, unless there's a really good reason. Mogri Flesh Shaper. So it might be the case where this card doesn't find room in Quest Shaman just because it's very inconsistent to activate. Like Sludge Slurper is a card you really want to be playing early on a lot of the time, and if you are saving it, you want to be using your hero power alongside it. And it becomes a bit awkward to actually play a card this expensive whilst using your hero power at the same time. Something like the Wasp, which deals 3 damage, is a much better card than this in Quest Shaman. Next we have the Shaman Legendary, Nithog. 6 mana 5/5 Battlecry, summon 2 0/3 eggs. Next turn they hatch into 4/4 drakes with Rush. It's a dragon as well. And now the eggs themselves aren't death rattles. If they are cleared off by the opponent, you won't get the 4/4 drakes out of them. You generally want to be ahead when you play this card, so you get the most out of the effect. If you play this onto an empty board on turn 6, it is actually quite difficult for the opponent to answer it efficiently. There aren't answers available. Things like rush minions can kill off maybe one of the eggs, but then in terms of tempo, you'll be still ahead if you play Nithog. So you want to be putting this in a deck where you have board control most of the time, and that's looking like something like a tokeny Shaman, things of great board control options. But like I was just talking about, that overload token style deck has a real hard time playing expensive cards, and 6 mana, I think, for this conditional effect is way too much for that style deck. So I don't think this would make the cut in an overload Shaman style deck, even though if you get the effect off it, it's quite good. There has to be some sort of mid-range dragon style deck. I mean, you could run this in a Shudderwock style deck or even Quest Shaman. Hero power plus this on turn 8 is pretty good. Getting this back with a Shudderwock is pretty good a lot of the time. But for overall purpose, I think this card is probably not going to see too much play. It doesn't seem that good to me. But I could be wrong. It is a lot of stats if you get it off, and the 4/4s do have Rush. Next we have Banda Smosh. 5 mana, 5/5. Okay, stat line. Each turn this is in your hand, transform it into a 5/5 copy of a random legendary minion. Right, so some clever clogs have gone through all of the legendaries and evaluated whether or not you get a good effect from this. And for the most part, you're going to get a positive effect. A lot of the time you get something that doesn't really do anything. It's just going to be 5 mana, 5/5. But there are some potentially game-breaking ones like Hyreek. I mean, you'd assume this card's a meme card, but there is potential for it to be okay. You don't actually have to play it if you don't get a good legendary, but it is a bit of a roll of the dice, because usually there is a certain window where you want to be playing this card, which is usually your 5 mana turn. I don't think it's good enough. Most of the time it's going to be a 5 mana 5/5 that doesn't do anything, with the occasional high roll. It's certainly a funny card, and you'll make some good highlight reels. Next we have the Warlock Legendary. I don't think it's been named yet, it's just a translation. 8 mana 4/12. Whenever your hero takes damage, summon a 6/6 Nether Drake. So that includes, if you just play this on the board and your opponent goes faced, every time they hit faced, you're going to get a 6/6 out of it. So kind of has mega taunt in that your opponent really needs to kill this before they start pushing face damage, unless they can just lethal you anyway. But a lot of the time, you're hitting face when this is on board is too damaging for you. You can combo it yourself with like life tap on turn 10, but I think for the most part you're going to just be wanting to drop this as soon as you can, and then just hope that the stats that it produces itself will be good enough. It is very, very expensive. 8 mana is a steep price to pay to be playing a minion that doesn't technically have taunt and doesn't actually rush anything or anything like that. So big value engine. If you're in a mid-rangey sort of matchup, you're not getting lethaled, this is going to turn the tides a lot of the time. But against things like Warrior, you might find that the Warlock Dragon, you're not going to get any effect from your opponent proccing it, and you have to proc it yourself, or they might just have removal for it. So it's not going to really help you in the pure control matchups, I think. And against aggro, I think 8 mana might come down a little bit too late, even though the effect is very, very powerful. If you can do it and not die, this will win you the game, I think, a lot of the time. There is potential like you reduce this card with the 4 mana 5/4 Frizzle, whatever it was called, that was just revealed. So this isn't as detrimental to you, but this might be a case where loads of stats late in the game, but it's just too late in the game for it to be impactful. Next for Mage, we have Arcane Breath, 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion if you're holding a Dragon Discovery spell. This seems like a really good and versatile card. You have Markshot and Hunter right now, which is a 4 mana card that deals 4 to discover a spell. So 1 mana for half the damage, and it's a Mage spell, which is generally better than Hunter spells, I would say. Seems like a powerful effect. You can combo this with Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it's free. And potentially the spell that you discover is also very cheap as well. There's the potential for this to go in multiple archetypes of Mage. You can put it with a tempo style Cyclone Mage, because this synergizes really well with playing loads of spells, loads of cheap spells, and generating more spells. And you can play it in Arena style Mage, because you're likely going to be running a bunch of dragons in that deck anyway. And the card itself is just quite efficient. This combos really quite well with Azure Explorer. Azure Explorer is a dragon itself, so you can use that as your activator if you want to play this on like turn 1. If you want on turn 5, you can play your Azure Explorer. That's going to discover you another dragon, and then you'll have a nice 1 mana deal 4 to accompany it, which is potentially really strong. You can run other cards like Shooting Star, and you're starting to look like you have a pretty good mid-game tempo push, which isn't going to run you out of value because you have the Azure Explorer discovering you a dragon for extra gas, and you have Arcane Breath discovering you a spell for extra gas. So yeah, it seems like a very strong, versatile card, and the way Mage is shaping up right now, I'm kind of seeing 2 potential archetypes. One being the Highlander Mage, which is going to get some nice additions of potential dragons to put in there, where this might find a home as well. And the other is some sort of Cyclone Spell Mage, and I think Arcane Breath is a good contender for both of those decks. Next up we have Dragoncast, a 6 mana 4/4 battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, your next spell this turn costs 0. So there was a Highlander effect, a 7 mana 5/5 with sort of this card text, but the requirement was that you had to have a Highlander deck rather than having a dragon in your hand. And that card wasn't actually that good. Really, the only expensive spells you want to be comboing it with are like Flame Strike and Blizzard. There is Yogg's Puzzle Box in the game now, so that is an additional card you could use. There is Pyroblast as well, although Pyroblast is like one of those cards where it's like, it's not very good until it's good. It's not a versatile card. It's like, if you can kill them with it, it's great, but if you're using it for removal, it's usually not too good. So if you are wanting to use this, and I think it's very likely that Mage is going to have either a Highlander style deck or a Cyclone style deck. I don't think you want to put this in a Cyclone Mage at all, because all your spells are cheap, you don't need the discount. But in a Highlander deck, you will have things like Blizzard and Flame Strike. The problem I have with this card is it only combos with them, and it's not a dragon itself, and the bonus you get is just playing essentially a free 4/4 with it, which is okay, but it's not like super crazy good, given that it has multiple conditions. The conditions being you have an expensive spell that you want to play that turn, and you have a dragon in hand. And deck space is going to be quite tight for that deck. So this is one of those cards I think seems really powerful, but there's a couple things holding it back, and it's ultimately probably not going to make the final cut of the deck it's most likely going to have a chance to be in, which is Highlander Mage. And for Rogue, we have Stowaway. This is 5 mana 4/4 battlecry. If there are cards in your deck that didn't start there, draw 2 of them. So this card has good synergy with shuffle style effects, particularly Wax of Dread. is one of them. There's Shadow of Death, which was a card from last set which has seen no play, but this has potential for it to be not as bad tempo. If your opponent's played somewhat of a threat on their turn 4, you can Shadow of Death it and then follow up with a Stowaway. And the Stowaway is going to put both of the Shadow of Death cards into play and draw you an extra 2 cards. So that seems like pretty good. For Wax of Dread style decks, you need to actually activate your Wax of Dread before Stowaway becomes good. A good way to do that is by playing Necrium Apothecary, which will gain your Wax of Dread death roll and draw you another Wax of Dread, so you can go coin 2/5 and then follow that up with the Wax of Dread itself. And once both of them have died, then you play a Stowaway to resummon both your Wax of Dreads. And that seems really good, although it is very slow. Like, it's a big tempo push eventually, and then you're going to have repetitive value from the Wax of Dreads being resummoned through your deck. But for your turns 4 and 5, you're going to really fall behind, and you might end up just dying before you can really get the effect off. If you haven't drawn your Wax of Dread or your 4-mana 2/5, or potentially if you've drawn your Wax of Dread and your 4-mana 2/5, you might be in a case where you can only play a Wax of Dread and the 4-mana 2/5 does nothing more. So you're only going to be resummoning 1 7/5 in that case, because you can only have one of them die. And then maybe Stowaway is not strong enough. There's a lot of conditions, and I think any sort of aggro deck is really going to blow you over if you start trying to do this very slow shuffly style stuff. And things like Silence and Polymorphs and etc. can just ruin you if you play a Wax of Dread and then your hand's stuck with Stowaways that do nothing. It seems really quite bad. I think a better perhaps use for this card is either with Shadow of Death, which probably isn't too strong, or with some of the Demon Shuffle cards. There's a 4-mana 5/2 that shuffles 3 2/2s into your deck, and then when you draw them they come out as a 2/2 rush. You just play that on 4 and then play Stowaway on 5, and you're going to get 2 2/2 rushes, and it's going to draw you an extra 2 cards. So it seems like a lot of gas. I'm not sure if that's actually strong enough to see play, but it's certainly a less taxing deck requirement and draw requirement combo than the Wax of Dread seems to be, although Wax of Dread is certainly stronger in the late game. I mean, there is potential that you can run both in the same deck. That way, when you haven't drawn your Wax of Dread combo, you can at least make use of your Stowaways by shuffling the Demon Portals into your deck otherwise. Very cool card. It certainly makes the Wax of Dread seem a lot more appealing than what we were looking at before. I think we need a little bit of playtesting to see whether it's actually strong though. Of course, potential for Toggle Scheme and like Pogo Hoppers and that sort of thing as well.